Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Professor Hamamoto, April 12, year 2026. The time 4 p.m. PDT. Welcome, one and all, especially those of you who are in the lovely live stream. And I encourage all of you to look back at the previous talk and the talks before it, because this one that I'm about to present to you today is continuing that thread that I'm pulling on here. And today's title, Deliberately Provocative, Charlie Sheen, otherwise known as Carlos Esteves, Charlie Sheen, the Malibu Magus of Chaos Magic. A Magus or a Magus is a magician generally. It's more involved than that, but you'll understand what I'm implying as we proceed based upon my reading of his recent publication. It's an autobiography, The Book of Sheen, a memoir, right? The Book of Sheen, I just realized is that intended to sound biblical or scriptural, like the Book of Daniel? It's like one of the Gospels. If so, then this is the gospel of Luciferianism. It's definitely an agenda that is arguing for unrepentant hedonism and self-indulgence. In other words, I hesitate to use the term, but I'll say it right at the outset. It's very consistent with all this chatter, and some of it's bogus. I'll grant you that. A lot of this chatter that we're hearing about so far as the antichrist figures that are polluting the political sphere, including the current president, Donald Trump, is being mentioned as in that realm of the antichrist. And there's more than one. There's several of them. And certainly we seem to be heading towards apocalypse. I'm not going to say one way or another whether I subscribe to that belief. I personally think it's going to be a much more prolonged, torturous decline than a quick and easy one of so-called rapture. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're looking at this book, and I found out, because I read it after watching not one, but both parts so far, maybe there's going to be more, of the Netflix production of the Charlie Sheen documentary. I watched them one day after I had to assimilate part one. The next day I watched part two. Part one, if you only had to watch one, I'd watch the first one. The second one, there's not much repetition, but if you've seen the first one, then you'll understand the argument of what he represents. And I'll just cut right to the chase because I know some of you are impatient and don't like any sort of prolonged analytical preludes, right? You want to go to the drive-through, whether it's food, sex, like Charlie Sheen, or education, whatever it is. You want to be in the drive-through lane, so it's quick and easy, and all you have to do is smash it in your face, and then you're happy as a pig, right? But I will tell you up front that I believe that on the basis of what I'm seeing here, and not just in the case of Charlie Sheen, but also Melania Trump's recent appeal to the public, which made such a huge sensation. I'm going to not spend any time on that because you have all the pop-up pundits who are claiming this. It's incredible the people you see on TikTok and TubeView who are experts in these matters now, which is, I take this as an opportunity to up my game. That is, present material here that you're not going to get anywhere else. Original material, original insights, as well as deep what I call cultural forensics study, specifically of American culture, politics, and society. And we're looking at it now via the totemic animal known as Carlos Esteves, or as you know him as Charlie Sheen. Right? He anglicized his name. His family did. Why? Well, this seems to be a common pattern for presidents of the United States. Right? Gerald Ford had a couple of different identities. President Gerald Ford, if you can remember that far back. He was also on the Warren Commission. Barack Hussein Obama had a number of identities. We just got through that national nightmare and through the whole identification and the birth certificate. You heard all that, right? And even Donald J. Trump. Trump is not the original family name. It's Drumpf. He's a Teutonic Knight. He's a Scottish Templar coming together. We're going to talk about the Templars today. We're going to talk about the Knights Hospitaliers. We're going to talk about the Secret Society. We're going to talk about the Freemasonics, of course, and not just gratuitously, but I'm going to show some of the receipts. And I would implore you, those of you who want to do this type of research, and to be more than just sort of a glorified reaction personality on TikTok or TubeU, commenting on the commenters, commenting on comments. I mean, there are people who have made a living out of being a commentator on whatever Candace Owens said. Well, Candace Owens said this, or Whitney Webb said this. But you won't see anybody say, well, Professor Hamamoto said that. No, because I'm a one-off. And the people who study the real media know about me, and they created a synthetic construct who's a intelligence, maybe double, triple agent of some sort, who I have critiqued here. And he's already, because of my critique, has already experienced a drop-off in credibility. And I only mentioned this not to take credit for that, but to point out the fact that this type of presentation has been having more effective and immediate and quicker results than in times past. So when I talk about Carlos Esteves and his father, Martin Sheen, otherwise known as Ramon Gerard Antonio Esteves, you're going to assimilate this, and you're not going to fall for the trap of electing Charlie Sheen, or he'll probably run as Carlos Esteves, because we need a new presidente who is Latino. Right? This is the up-and-coming group. Right? They already put a Negro in there. His name was Barack Hussein Obama, although he was half white. But he was all Asian because that's where he was socialized in Indonesia by his mama, who was guess what, an anthropologist, quote unquote. So it's about time for a Latino. That could be Carlos Esteves. By the way, I'll announce right at this juncture that because I know that the Estados Unidos de America is going brown, going Latino. See, they already removed Cesar Chavez, and they're moving in the mamacitas to take over. So I'm getting on the bandwagon, the Mamacita bandwagon, and I'm officially changing my name because that seems to be de rigueur amongst the cultural elite, of which I count myself. Not really. That's a stretch. I'm being ironic purposely here. I'm going to follow suit. I'm going to change my name too. I'm going to be calling myself Pico, Professor Pico Hamamoto. I was going to be a Jewish comedian, a Jewish intellectual. I was going to be called Shlomo Hamamoto. But Jews themselves are putting brown people up front like they did Cesar Chavez, and they're picking Asian people to do that. So, I'm going to go with the flow on that one. So I'm not going to be no Shlomo, no Mo. I'll just be Pico Hamamoto. How's that? All right, let's take a look at what at Charlie Sheen's representation of his book here. This is a leather. I looked at the iconography closely. Despite its casual appearance, you can bet that the semiological composition was put together quite meticulously by the photographers, by the art directors, by the publishers. This is a leather jacket, of course. This is it looks like it's draped casually over his shoulder with his rumpled. This is all studied casualness. And what always intrigued me about Charlie Sheen, that even as a baby, there's a picture of him as a baby. Even as a baby, he had that look that he's got like a headache. He's got the perma scowl. He must have been 2 years old. He had the perma scowl, kind of like his daddy. Like he's got like a colossal head. He should like become a spokesperson for Bayer aspirin. Bayer, of course, being the primary sponsor of the New World War. It's perfect. It's kind of reminiscent of, I don't know if you remember the actor David Jansen, a fine actor. He later had his own TV show, but he was on The Fugitive. That's where he really came to fame. But he was a stage actor and he was in movies, David Jansen. But he always looked like he had a headache. So in the cases of Carlos Esteve, I'll use his name interchangeably. In the case of El Presidente to be, Carlos Esteves, I think he has a headache of the soul. All right, we'll get into this in a moment. Now, to save you some time, I will state that with certain glaring exceptions, the Netflix 2-part documentary that have already dropped is identical to the book, right? Of course, one's in printed form, so he can go off on little excursions, which are very clever, and there are certain literary-like flourishes that Charlie Sheen and his editors went through. I'm sure he's incapable of putting together coherent sentences like this. He had a lot of help, just like he's had help since he was a baby, or not a baby, since he was 10, 11 years old. He's been indulged and coddled and groomed from the cradle. Where the grave comes in, time will tell, but I think he'll make it to the presidency at some point before they pull the plug on him, just like they used Donald Trump, Charlie Sheen. And I'll give you more examples of why I'm concluding that Charlie Sheen is being groomed for a high-level presidential position. I think the reason why Trump is being not let go, I mean, we're now in the descent phase of his script. The reason for that is to make way for the new generation of political leader, and Charlie Sheen is in the running for that. Now, I know that amongst a lot of people, the odds-on favorite was none other than Tom Hanks. But I think Charlie Sheen's a dark horse. He's coming at it from the slow lane, right? Passing in the slow lane. So first of all, let's take a look at how Charlie Sheen himself presents his own book.
3rd, 1965, in New York City at 10:58 p.m., I was born dead. That's how this thing starts. Welcome to the Book of Sheen, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, welcome, Charlie.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's really nice.
Isn't it nice to show Charlie some love? Doesn't it feel good? there's something about Charlie that brings out the love in people, I believe. And one of the things I've been thinking about, and I've said this before, is that like the word enthusiasm is the root of is a Greek word which means to have God in you. And I think when I look at your performances and when I look at your life, I see that enthusiasm, that life force, and I think it's very unapologetic and forceful, and I think that's what people respond to with the kind of love that you're feeling tonight, and which I think you'll feel in response to this book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm feeling.
It's not really a question, is it?
It's really not.
Yeah, let's look at those eyes. Oh my gosh. Let's look at those Charlie Manson eyes. It's the eyes. It's not an act. See, why people like Charlie Sheen is that what you see is what you get. Right? If people are telling you something, if Trump is telling you something, don't play it out. Oh, he's just playing 3D chess, or he's just doing these rhetorical. He's just trolling the public. No, these people mean what they say, and they're going to make you eat their words, right? Oh, and the reason why I picked this clip in part was because we got to see a bonus glimpse of another fan favorite, David Duchovny. Of the Triple X Files. No, that's the porn version of X Files. No, the X Files. Right. Yeah. I'm that guy who wrote off-color titles for the porn business. They take a popular movie and then they give it some sort of salacious twist, and they put it on anything that's that's coming out of the San Fernando. That's the job that I wanted. But let's get back to David Duchovny. I think he might make another political figure. All these people are being presented like in a beauty contest. They show up on the Ellen DeGeneres show, or Rosie O'Donnell, or Colbert. Was it Stephen Colbert? I'm exploring the Colbert French bloodline, by the way. Casually, not, maybe I'll do a presentation on him later, because all these people are connected to bloodlines, right? Fritz Springmeier only documented a select few bloodlines of the Illuminati, but there are many, many more than that. And these days in particular, many of them now are in entertainment, like David Duchovny of the Triple X Files. Now, that's my X-rated version of X-Files, right? Yeah, he was recruited out of a doctoral program in literature, because the literary arts are very much integral to this larger psychological operation that we are being treated to in the past 2 to 3 decades. I started in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s in particular. As you know, I'm hearkening back to Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place, as inspired by listening to the stories of her own growing up and coming of age. A frequent guest on this show, Lena Pooh, who talks about watching the salacious activity. And she grew up in the Bible Belt. She grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is she like one of them conservative yeller people from the South, conservative Christian. So she was watching all this coming out of. This is during the decade of Aaron Spelling, right? And that's when these characters were being brought to the fore. The Sheen family, in particular, the Esteves family in specific. Going back not just to Martin Esteves, but his father, I can't remember his Christian name, but his father was an immigrant from España. That's how it's said in Spain. España, not España. So, but I'll say España. Galicia in particular. Now I need to look more into the history and politics of Galicia in the pre-modern period, but it was its own kingdom. It was its own domain within what later became the nation state of Spain as we see today, España, Galicia. It's a northeastern edge of what is today Spain. And from a DNA perspective, the recent genealogical DNA studies point to the higher percent, so far as Iberians are concerned, Portuguese and other people on the Iberian Peninsula, which is the farthest most geographic formation in Europe, pointing towards the Americas and Asia, which was one of the reasons why they took the leadership in maritime exploration. They were already out there in the ocean, right? But the Galicians are a distinct ethnic group. That's a contemporary designation. They're more like a nation, right? And that is the Esteves bloodline. So I need to look at his Martin Sheen's father and his grandfather, his great grandfather, going back a few generations, and it can be done these days. That's not the purpose of today's talk. One of you can do it. I mean, I'm saying that these methodologically, these are important steps that you need to take to really understand this person who's being positioned to become not the next, but a president of the United States of America, or maybe an appointed head of a United Nations globalist New World Order organization, which is perhaps supranational, beyond USA, right? That's a possibility. But as you know, these processes are put in play years, decades, generations ahead of time by the people who are planning these regimes. By the time most of us catch on to it, history has already happened. This is what Marx pointed out. He says history is made behind people's backs, right? But through the use of the method and the theory I call cultural forensics, we can cut them off at the pass by exposing their rear naked ends, their bare butts to the public before they really have a chance to gain traction. All right, it's a chess game. You can do a preemptive strike here, and that's what it is. Preemptive strikes are really the important part of the game of Go and chess, all the strategy games, right? And I'm an expert at that. Except I study the social world, I study the cultural world and the political world. And for that reason, that's why my subscriptions are suppressed at this time. Please take the opportunity to subscribe, because one day I want to be as big as Candace Owens. Man, she is feeling it now, isn't she? Yeah, she's being called out by Donald Trump by name. She's exactly where her handlers have led her toward. Right? She's even surpassed Joe Rogan, one of the dudes. By the way, one of the literary flourishes in this book that I like, and I will use in my own work, except I'll add a D, is that Charlie Sheen spells D-U-D-E, dude, D-O-O-D. He uses the word because he's a Malibu man. He's the Malibu Ken. He's the companion to the Malibu Barbie. So those guys like Sean Penn and his brother Chris Penn, who OD'd, by the way, he's mentioned in the book, Chris Penn, they were buddies, they were playmates in the Sheen milieu. It's not talked about that Chris Penn OD'd. This is not too long ago, because Charlie Sheen himself has almost OD'd many, many times. And he's even been the focus of not one, not two, not three, but 7 quote unquote interventions. And I agree with them. I think they're a farce. And I think the whole therapeutic industry that has been built up to cater to rich, spoiled Malibu brats like Charlie Sheen and Sean Penn and all these other characters, they can all go to hell so far as I'm concerned. Not interested. I'm only interested in it as sort of a playground that's important, simply because these people have been put in the position of mind fucking the public, so that it will later take their place within this synthetic hierarchy, this ceremonial governance system called the presidency, the Senate, the House of Representatives, the Supreme Court. Any other institutions you cherish? Right? The West Wing. Woo! By the way, part of this, the outcome of this study that I've been doing on Charlie Sheen is that I will now go in on the West Wing. And Aaron Sorkin, the creator, producer, I have all the material. I haven't made the books. I've been collecting them. I've just been waiting to find out how do I conceptualize it, because I think the West Wing is a seminal television mass media project to pave the way for someone like Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and whoever will come next, which could be Martin Sheen himself or Charlie Sheen. You see what I'm saying? West Wing. The scenario has already been played out. Because some of you might not know, Martin Sheen played the president of the United States in the West Wing. Some of you younger people might not know who Martin Sheen is. So we're going to go back a little bit in history to flesh out the Martin Sheen story, the Sheen household, the Esteves household, which actually goes back to the medieval kingdoms of España or Aragon or Castile. They're Castiliano. That's why, by the way, they don't look a mestizo. The Esteves family do not look mestizo. They're not brown people, but they're going to present themselves as brown people politically, just like AOC or Paulina Luna. Both of them are Jewish, actually. Right. And there are Jews positioning themselves in the American Southwest who are adopting Latino heritage so that they can present themselves as criptos, marranos, conversos. In fact, the Esteves families themselves, they might be marranos. They might be crypto Jews. I don't know. We have to find out. But some of you may know that Charlie Sheen, not too long ago, reaffirmed his belief, his faith in Roman Catholicism. He even made a movie called The Way. My gosh, does that have biblical resonance or not? The way. The only way that I know is the way to God, to Jesus. But as you know, the whole society not only has been anti-Christian, but it's been the religious institutions themselves and religiosity, spiritual life, Christianity in particular, is under attack. And this is not something recent. It goes back decades, and it was really given a boost during the television age. Let's say late 50s to the 1950s, definitely. All right. Why am I mentioning this? Because Martin Sheen changed his name from Esteves, a noble, probably lineage. Esteves, probably clerics, priests, right? And judges, people who were in the judicial system of the kingdom, and maybe during the Republican period. I don't know. I have a feeling they were probably... The reason why the grandfather family came to the U.S. is because they were political exiles. He might have been on the run because he was a political dissident or radical. just like a lot of Spanish dissidents went to Mexico, or they went to Germany, they went to other parts of the world because of political repression. But this is something that we have to delve into further. So we are going to be probing, maybe not fully here today, but probing into the Roman Catholicism of Martin Sheen. I'll use his actor's name here. Here's a brief piece explaining, because he's always being asked now, even now, why they changed the name. At least Martin and Charlie changed the name. The eldest son, Emilio, they all have Christian names that are Spanish, and so does the daughters. Right? He kept his name as Emilio Estevez. Yes, they're brothers, but you notice they do not look mestizo. They look like Celtic DNA people. They look more like Northern Europeans. And if you've been to España, even if you've been to Madrid, you look around and you don't see Mexican people. You see Europeans. They have light skin. A lot of them have brown hair. So you have blonde-eyed, green-eyed people. A lot of them walking around. But of course, Madrid is a capital city. But I'm saying that when you think of España, you don't think automatically default to mestizos like we see in Los Angeles, California, or Sacramento, or now in the Middle West, places where there were none. Another reason why the Vatican would like to see a person with a Spanish surname, especially a noble line like Estevez, in the White House, because the demographics are supporting that transformation. And the demographics itself is not really the object. That is just a method of assuming and taking control of political economic power. It's in numbers. And look at Martin Sheen's social justice. He's been arrested dozens of times, maybe scores of times, for demonstrations, protests, marches. This is Martin Sheen. He is a committed leftist, progressive. I don't know if I'd call him liberation theology, but he is one of those activist Roman Catholics, which I respect, by the way. If it were not for the fact that I'm detecting ulterior political motives in a lot of these characters, including Martin Sheen. The Berrigan brothers is during the Vietnam War. I support Philip and I forgot the other guy's name. They wrote extensively. They were heroes of mine. They were up there with the now fallen from grace Cesar Chavez and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. The Berrigan, they were priests. They went to all the demos wearing their clerical collars. They were saying, stop the bombing in Vietnam. I don't see many clerics today in the United States of America vocal in such a fashion as the Berrigan brothers. So, right, don't ding me for what you are assuming to be anti-clerical or anti-Catholic sentiments. I mean, America needs Roman Catholics. Right? Because in all these horror movies, who will be doing the exorcisms? That's why we need Catholic priests. I'm kidding. I actually stole that joke from another video there. I thought I have to rat on myself because some of you might think I'm being serious about that. But they're, university institutions, scholarship, even amongst the Jesuits, the Franciscans, certain activities, I fully support. But as we both know, usually it's a case where one hand gives and the other hand's taking. So here's Martin Sheen explaining why he changed the family name to Estevez, and he regrets it. It was opportunity, it was political opportunism then, and it's political opportunism now, just like in the case of Alejandro or Ocasio-Cortez and Paulina Luna. And what's the guy? He's a halfie. Beto O'Rourke. And you see that amongst the racial hybrids of yellows too, like what's her name? The one that keeps marrying tech billionaire, Nicole Shanahan. She bought her way into the vice president candidacy with RFK Jr. Jr. You're going to see more of those people running around too. So here it is.
Change your name, and Emilio, why didn't you change your name?
Well, go. You want to? I thought you'd never ask. No, I never changed my name. My name officially is still Ramon Esteves on my passport, driver's license, and so forth. And I love my name. I never would change it. But when I came to New York in 1959, there was a great, prejudice against Hispanics, largely against the Puerto Rican community that I adored. And I felt very much a part of the Hispanic community. But my look, what they were telling me, was Irish. Okay, I said, well, I'll try this name. So I took the name of Martin from Robert Dale Martin. I talk about in the book, was a casting director at CBS when I came here, and he was encouraging to me. And the last name Sheen from Fulton J. Sheen. He was the auxiliary bishop of New York at the time, and he was, when I was growing up as a teenager, he was the first televangelist, on television. He had a Tuesday night primetime show called Life is Worth Living, and he gave a lecture, a half-hour lecture every night, and he was #1 in the country. He beat Milton Berle in the ratings, and he was a very popular personality. But I thought of him as an actor. I mean, he had this great look, and he was very intense. I didn't have a clue what he was talking about, his theology or politics, but I loved his performance. And so I thought, I'll give him a try. So I put the two names together, thinking if they didn't work, I'll try another name. Who knows, And so I started working, I worked as a theater usher, I worked as a messenger, I worked as
This his account there got me to thinking about my own childhood. He's older than me by a number of years, but I remember Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He was an ordained priest. And he was one of the first people from the clergy. His counterpart in the Protestant world was Oral Roberts. Those of you who are a certain age will remember this, but those of you who are younger, go to TubeU and look up Oral Roberts, and you'll see faith healing. Whether it's fake or not, that's really not the issue or not, but take a look at that. These grainy old kinescopes that have been put there on TubeU. And the other one that Martin Sheen mentions is Archbishop Fulton Sheen. That's where he took his name from, right? I mean, I knew that, okay, but I just was reminded of the fact that he was influenced by this televangelist, which I used to watch in my pajamas on the new family propaganda machine that are now right in our household. It's called television. You take it for granted now, but it was a huge step technologically, ideologically, in capturing the mind of the American public. And again, set aside the theology, the costuming for a moment, and just consider the fact that you have this man of the cloth, the clergyman. And this particular excerpt that I'll show you in a moment is colorized, because this is before even color television was possible. By the way, the inventor of color television was a Mexican national. He got it taken away from him because he only wanted to help his own Mexican people. He was a self-taught electrical engineer in Mexico City. Anyway, that's just a bit of. So I'm saying there's a lot of reason why people who are Latino with Spanish surnames have a cause for pride because of their accomplishment in all the fields, right? Yet Esteves thought he had to anglicize himself to become acceptable to the homogenized audience of the night, which wasn't really homogenous. It was actually diverse, but they wanted to present the media people, the social cultural engineers, the advertisers, the corporatocracy. They wanted to present what is referred to as Anglo conformity, That's the norm. And so you had all kinds of, you had Italians who tried to anglicize their names. You had Jews that anglicized their names. You had ethnic, quote unquote, people who would butcher their own faces so that they would have cute little Irish noses instead of giant Semitic schnozolas like Jimmy Durante. By the way, there's a lot of literature. Check it out. There's books, textbooks on it. It's called the subfield in surgery is called ethnic rhinoplasty. Rhinoplasty is surgery on your nose. Ethnic, and this is for non-Caucasian, I mean non-European people. It's so the demand is large enough where you can specialize in it. And in fact, the best people, the top talent and the highest compensated specialists in ethnic rhinoplasty are in Beverly Hills, California. And most of the practitioners are Iranian Jewish surgeons. Just like the generation before them, most of them were Jewish surgeons because you had Jews who were so embarrassed of their Khazarian background. I won't call it Jewish, Khazarian, because they were Central European, right? That they would mutilate themselves. And they're doing it in South Korea. They're doing it in China, you see. This is all part of a Luciferian, the satanic effort of self-mutilation of humanity, because God's work is already perfect. So why not just go right in there and start screwing with it? Anyway, I'm not going to get into the whole the theology of it. I'm just in a nutshell. That's my feeling of it. All right. If you know, it was such a huge step forward when Barbra Streisand, first, one thing, she didn't change her name from Streisand to Smith or whatever. And then she shows up on an album cover in profile so that we could see her Semitic profile, which is beautiful, you know. And of course, you know, she could sing, obviously. If she dicked with her nose, her whole tone production would suffer from that. All right. And then black people, you know the whole story there. Madam C.J. Walker, she was selling hair straightening product to black women's. And then the Black is Beautiful came in during the 1960s. And then you saw the black women and the men's rocking the fros. I think the fros should come back. This is during the glory days of Soul Train. And like I told you before, my fantasy in life was one day to become a Soul Train dancer. I mean, my whole life is just full of disappointments. I thought I was going to become a fan favorite on TubeU. And what happens? They have this construct, this imitator called, quote unquote, Professor Zhang, slide right in there. Nah, it really doesn't bother me because I know it's bullshit, and the people who are watching them, they deserve him. I want them to watch Professor Zhang, just like I want them to watch Mr. Miyagi, and I want them to keep eating at Panda restaurants and just keep sucking up the MSG. And there's enough of the reality left for me to be happy. And I'll share it with you, of course. So here is an example of Bishop Sheen, and I owe him a lot myself, not from a theological perspective, but I studied him as a youth, just as I've studied other televangelists as recently as Joel Osteen. And again, I'm not talking about what he's saying and what he represents. I'm just, excuse me a second. I'm just talking about his technique. And like Archbishop Sheen, I would usually start my lectures on the New World Order, what later became cultural forensics, but I'm presenting today. It's very dark, right? So I would start my classroom lectures at UC Davis because I was a university professor, unlike quote unquote Professor Zhang. He teaches high school students that he recruits from the US so they can become spies for the People's Republic of China, send them back to the United States. That's the basic psyop there. Excuse me. My throat is a mess. But I would always lead my lectures with a amusing anecdote. Kind of soften them up a little bit. And you'll see this technique in play with the consummate actor, Bishop. And he was a right winger. He was a cold warrior for the Vatican, right? In the guise of a benevolent helper of lepers and orphan children, right? And we know that that is a common strategy to gain to gain entrance, to gain the confidence. Here we go.
I have a beautiful young audience here immediately in front of me, and I called the youngest of them to me just a few minutes ago, and I said, if you get tired, you go to sleep. That applies to the rest of you in the audience as well. I was once talking in a church, and a baby began to cry, and the mother took the babe out. As she was going down the aisle, I said, "Madam, the child is not bothering me." She said, "No, you're bothering the child." A woman bought an expensive dress, brought it home to the husband, showed him the bill, and he said to her, "When you tried it on, why didn't you say, 'Get behind me, Satan'?" She said, "I did," and he said, "It looks so good from the back." There was a man went to heaven, and he thought perhaps he would like to go to hell, see what it was like, and he asked St. Peter if he could go down. So he went down to hell and rather enjoyed himself over the weekend. Came back to heaven, and the following weekend said to Peter, "Really, I didn't mind it down there. Could I go down again?" "Yes," said Peter. And for the second time, he came back and reported enjoying himself. The third time, he asked to go down, and Peter said, "Now this is your last time." When he got down, the devil put him in one of the hot corners of hell. And he said to the devil, "When I was here before, you treated me nicely." "Yes," he said, "then you were a tourist. Now you're a resident." So remember, we get treated very well now by the devil, but when we're residents, he does not treat us as well. I have a missionary priest friend whom has been my intimate for over 35 years.
So you can study his pacing there. I'm sure he had writers. They were probably people who worked the Borscht Belt, who were writing the material for him. Because the rest of his talk were about fighting the commies and supporting the American flag and all these great virtues of the 1950s that we assess. So that's what Martin Sheen was seeing there. And this is what millions of Americans, including myself, were being exposed to. And we were on television. We were internalizing these values. And then later, when the society intensified its propaganda effort to the point where we were asked to throw our bodies into the battle to fight yet another hostile force, not in the country, the United States of America, but overseas in Asia, then we're ready to do that. Because we are also being exposed to all these war movies. John Wayne is emblematic of that, right? And then later on, after the humiliating defeat in the war against American imperial aggression, that's what the Vietnamese people call it, there were a series of books, articles, confessionals, television specials, and films that were produced in order to help rationalize the great sacrifice of American men primarily and resources fighting for this enemy force that was associated with the devil himself, thanks to the efforts of people like Fulton Sheen and Oral Roberts and Billy Graham later, a little bit later on. And are we seeing certain patterns line up that are reminiscent of that when we're talking about TPUSA? Yes, and that's why this particular talk is relevant in 2026. And that's why we need to go back to the late 50s and 60s with Archbishop Fulton Sheen and the origins of Martin Sheen's role as an artist and a propagandist, because that's what he is. He's a propagandist for the Roman Church. Right? They have an organization, the Institute for the Propagation of Faith. That is an office within the Holy See. This is where they gather the money, the resources to help the lepers and the orphans and the widows. I'm sure some of that's happening, but most of it goes into the coffers of institutions like Banco Ambrosiano. Right, you know the story. I've been rewatching the Godfather trilogy by Francis Ford Coppola, who I understand is a Freemason himself, as well as close in some fashion to the Roman Catholic Church. The part 3 that's the whole premise of it. Right? They get screwed, the Corleone family gets screwed by the Vatican Bank. And the Banco di Ambrosiano and the hanging of Lucio Gelli on the Blackfriar Bridge, that's in the movie. And of course, Francis Ford Coppola just finessed it. Oh yeah, we got some of that from there. He doesn't go really deep into it. He can't. Because he doesn't want to give away the source of his trilogy. It's these occultic sources, just like, and I'll get to this at some point, the artistry of Jules Verne in French. Turns out he's a Freemasonic Rosicrucian. All of this was going into his his poetry and his novels, his fiction, and his public speeches. Right, most of it was, at least. Different approaches. And you think that's any different in the case of the Sheen bloodline or the Esteves family? No, not at all. In fact, they were selected. They were handpicked in order to carry the propaganda, which means propagation. Right? You take the seed, you take the cutting, you take the germ line, and you make it grow into a living life form that you control, and you get to pluck the fruit from it and eat it for yourself. That's propagation. That's propaganda. That's propaganda due. All right. And here we go. You'll recognize this person immediately because she's all in the news again. She's one of these people in the milieu of Luciferian control. And I don't use this term lightly. They were being promoted on the chat shows, the talk shows. Here we go. All 3 Sheens themselves of the male line: Martin Sheen, Emilio Estevez, and Charlie Sheen. Here we go. Do you think Charlie Sheen set Ellen DeGenerate up for that one? Emilio? She's alluding to the fact, of course, that the whole family has a fabricated identity. That's her role. Ellen, to clown celebrities. She gets her stutter on like she's a normal person, like Emilio. And of course, he's a good sport. He's playing along because the family's getting exposure as a expectant political entity, from Martin to Emilio to this is that segment there. There's a whole compilation of appearances by the three amigos. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. That just slipped out. Okay. And we know what happened now. They're all part of the same club that you're not in. And I'm not in it either. And I don't want to be in. Just let me clarify. I don't want in to that club, because some people say, well, you just clown these people because you're jealous. You want to be. No, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's really not my ambition. All right. I want to free us from these forms of bondage here. Okay, let's move on from the horse show here on the Ellen DeGeneres and move into the whole war propaganda system that Martin Sheen brought to the family. He really, most of you may not know this, but I encourage you to go back and watch Apocalypse Now if you haven't seen it before, or rewatch it, and you'll know that Martin Sheen is the focal point of the movie Apocalypse Now, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, who we have been talking about for the past 2, 3, 4 weeks already. He's the godfather of the Napa wine mafia. He's a patron. So is his wife, Eleanor Coppola. So Martin Sheen was brought. There's the whole account is here. It's also in Martin Sheen's book about how he got the role and the filming process. And I talked a little bit about it previously. There's a book here about the making of Apocalypse Now. There's a diary that was written by Eleanor Coppola herself, that because she was on the site in the Philippines, by the way, not in Vietnam, but the Philippines, to restage the Vietnam War, but in this time make it into a tragic mistake, right? Rather than a rational plan of genocide, of extinction of the yellow people, right? And of course, like all war movies set in Asia, you hardly see any yellow people. They're kind of faceless. They're not kind of, they are faceless. The only person who's made a war movie, Vietnam War movie, where you actually get to see the Vietnamese people, I'm talking about American directors, is Oliver Stone. He made one from the point of view of a young girl who was in Vietnam. It was based on a book by Lile Haslip, When Heaven and Earth Changed Places. It's a different title in the film, whichever. By the way, the starring role was given to a Vietnamese American student she was a student at the time from UC Davis, and she was an amateur, but she got the role. It's a good movie. It's not very well known. It's underappreciated, which only furthers the prejudice against putting yellow people in war movies, especially when the war is being waged in their country against the yellow people. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But here, Charlie Sheen is talking about the film Apocalypse Now, what it means to him.
Apocalypse Now, the greatest movie ever made.
Correctly, I labeled it as such, yeah.
What makes it that for you?
There's no computers involved. The elements that had to be endured, the performances, the storytelling, the insanity, the fact that every time you see it, you see something different, something new, or something affects you differently. it's a film that could never be made today. And if it did, we would feel the helicopters wouldn't have any weight. You know, they try to do this thing. I went to the movies years ago and I saw the latest King Kong thing version, and they try to do an apocalypse thing, sweeping through these jungles and and it just wasn't. I mean, yeah, it looked cool, but I knew that nobody's life was in danger. Yeah, and just, you know, the country's in the middle of a civil war. You know, Dad has a heart attack. Brando shows up, 300 pounds. I mean, it was just like one thing after another, and how Francis like kept it together, you know, and he shot 1 million feet of film, and that's like actual film. And somebody's like going through in an editing room in the frickin' jungle, you know. There's some story somebody told me about a lady that he had a meeting with or had a night with or something, and she like left with 2 reels of film during apocalypse and held it hostage and said, unless this or this happens, you're not getting that those canisters back. But those are just some of the reasons why I place Apocalypse atop that mantle, you know.
You said Brando's brain was kind of wired differently.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
from your kind of experience, what did you see?
As an 11-year-old or a 10-year-old,
right.
He did that thing where he could draw a.
In case you missed it, Charlie Sheen's talking about his firsthand observation on the set in the Philippines, observing, because Martin Sheen and his wife had a policy, like you can call it, or a habit, a practice of bringing all 4 of the kids wherever they went in the world while he was doing movies. They're sort of like a hippie family caravan. Right? School was not a priority, really, but being on site and experiencing life and traveling the world was their focal point. And he was 11 years old. Charlie Sheen was 11 years, seeing all this mayhem. Now, he didn't get to, it's in the book here. He didn't get to see all the real pivotal, gory scenes and some of the real bloody accidents that happened, including one involving his father, Martin Sheen. But he got to live in that environment for quite a number of months. I think the entire filming was lasted about 2.5 years. Not continuously. There were a couple of breaks there, but the film took about 2.5 years to shoot before it was even assembled. Apocalypse Now we're referring to. And I'm saying this is because I think at age 11, in the case of Charlie Sheen, I think that left some permanent PTSD type. He doesn't talk about it in the book. This is my assessment. PTSD level imprints or damage to Charlie Sheen. But you might even say it goes further because in Malibu, that's why he's the Malibu Magus, along with the Penn family and his other band of mates who lived in Point Doom part of Malibu, is that they made movies themselves with Super 8 cameras. These kids, they were rich, privileged, spoiled brats whose parents did not supervise them. They were into their own sensations, their own explorations of themselves, because they were relatively young themselves. They were in their 20s and late 20s, maybe early 30s at the most, and they were living this sort of post counterculture dream of cultural revolution, not the Maoist style, but countercultural revolution. So Charlie Sheen was making these movies with Super 8 cameras with a lot of blood and gore. And this was before the whole slasher craze of the 1980s, which he also grew up in. So he is part, and this is what I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, he is part of this cohort that was subjected to this intense, bloody, violent non-stop, unceasing traumatization through these media industries with people like who I talked about at length in a previous presentation, Wes Craven, Professor Wes Craven. He comes out of the academic world himself. George Lucas, Steven Spielberg. I gave a talk on that. See how it all kind of it's all of a piece. And by the way, Spielberg and Jeff Katzenberg, later they formed SKG or SKB. Well, they formed a, I think G, yeah, including David Geffen. They were part of the sitcom world as well, which we'll get to in a moment, because Charlie Sheen, at a certain point, moved into the world of television, which also happens to be one of my research specialties. Right? I didn't get to talk about in my book. This is called Nervous Laughter. This is an old-fashioned television set with the rabbit ear antenna. Television situation, common, liberal, democratic. This is the first and the best book on the politics of the television situation comedy. I wrote it. It's a perennial favorite. Now, the people who are supposedly scholars in media and television like to ignore it, just like they've put this guy named, quote unquote, Professor Jang in front of me so that my message, which is rooted in truth and experience and writing, because he's written shit, he's done nothing. He's a high school teacher. Okay, there is a big difference. And what I understand, even professors thinks he's wonderful because it shows you their low level of discernment as well. It's not just you. It's also professors thinks it's really good for the field to have this guy who's a fake, right? At least Archbishop Sheen was he was an ordained priest. Okay. So he went later into Spin City and 2.5 Men, which I'll talk to in a moment. I need to move on here. But you've seen the title that I referred to, Chaos Magick. Well, I think it behooves me to at least expose you to the concept of chaos magic and why it applies in the case of Charlie Sheen and Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez, who did a movie with his father called The Way. And I don't think he was in this movie, but there's a movie that stars Martin Sheen where I think he plays the football coach. It's about an orphanage in Texas. It's based on a real story. I ordered the film. I haven't seen it yet. But it's based on a real story about a free Masonic sponsored orphanage that converted these abandoned boys into a championship football team. Right? It's kind of like Hoosiers and all these feel-good movies about sports triumphing over bullies and the bad guys. So I'll see that, but I thought it was interesting that it was an explicit reference to these Freemasonic institutions, and furthering my suspicion that Martin Sheen, Charlie Sheen, Emilio Estevez are of that ilk. If they're not members, they are adjacent to it. Right? This is something that needs to be explored further. You do it, I'll do it. I'm going to be looking more into Martin Sheen, as I explained. So here's a taste of so-called chaos magic, just so you can explore it on your own.
Chaos magic. This form of magic emerged in the late 20th century, during a time when society was in the throes of transformation. The 1960s and 70s were decades of intense questioning and rebellion against established norms, political, social, and religious. It was in this environment that the seeds of chaos magic were sown, primarily in the United Kingdom. The roots of chaos magic can be traced back to earlier occultists like Aleister Crowley and Austin Osman Spare. Crowley, with his emphasis on the will and individualism, and Spare, with his pioneering work on sigils and the subconscious, provided the foundation upon which chaos magic would build. Spare's work, in particular, was revolutionary in its emphasis on the power of personal symbols and the manipulation of belief, a concept that would become central to chaos magic. In the 1970s, Peter J. Carroll and Ray Sherwin took these ideas and pushed them further, giving birth to what we now know as chaos magic. Carroll's books, Liber Null and Psychonaut, laid out the principles of this new magical system, emphasizing the use of belief as a tool, the importance of altered states of consciousness, and the rejection of rigid dogmas in favor of a results-oriented approach. Sherwin's work, including the Book of Results, further developed the practical aspects of chaos magic, particularly the use of sigils. One of the most radical aspects of chaos magic is its approach to belief. Traditionally, belief is something sacred, something to be held onto tightly. But chaos magic flips this on its head, turning belief into something fluid, something to be adopted, manipulated, and discarded as needed. This idea introduces an element of cognitive dissonance, as it challenges the notion that belief must be absolute. Instead, chaos magicians learn to switch beliefs as easily as changing clothes, adopting whichever belief system is most useful for their current magical goal. This practice is known as paradigm shifting, and it's a key aspect of chaos magic. By consciously adopting a belief, even temporarily, you're engaging in psychological priming. You prime your mind to view the world through a specific lens, accessing the powers and insights that come with that belief system. What matters in chaos magic is not the truth of the belief, but its effectiveness. The symbol of chaos magic is the chaos sphere, an 8-pointed star that represents infinite possibilities. Each point of the chaos sphere symbolizes a different path, a different belief system, a different way of seeing the world. It's a reminder that in chaos magic, you're not bound by any one tradition or dogma. You're free to explore, experiment, and create your own path. The chaos sphere is more than just a symbol. It's a cognitive trigger that helps chaos magicians remember that at any moment, they can shift their perspective, adopt a new belief, and open up new avenues of power. It embodies the core philosophy of chaos magic, that reality is not fixed but malleable, and that you have the power to shape it through your beliefs and actions.
Here is your Caped Crusader Chaos Magus, or Magus if you prefer. Carlos Esteves of the Bloodline. The Cavalier. By the way, his grandfather, Martin Sheen's father, was crestfallen. He was so disappointed when he saw the poster of his son, who he abandoned his name, Esteves, for Sheen. He was breaking the continuity there, right? So they're going to go back to it. They're going to resuscitate it. They're going to resurrect it. This is a story of redemption and resurrection. We like that. We're suckers for it. We, the American public. I mean, I'm not falling for it. Are you? Probably. If you like Professor quote unquote Jang or any of these other characters, you voted for Donald Trump. I did. And I did it strategically so that there would be chaos created because I wanted them to fight amongst themselves, right? Because I'm not going to affect anything through electoral change. That's just not the way the system's working up. So bring in Trump for that purpose. He thinks he's clowning us, but he's actually clowning the system. That's my assessment at this point. I could be wrong. Anyway, that's not the main topic today. Right. So we have Apocalypse Now that I mentioned. That was directed for your intro. That was released in 1979. A lot of Vaticano in it, a lot of Freemasonry in it. Then you have Platoon, 1986, directed by Oliver Stone, who also comes from an elite background. Oliver Stone, I think he was attending Princeton University. His family, I think his mother's side, are rich or wealthy or connected to some form. And many of you have seen enough interviews with Oliver Stone to get an idea of how he got into filmmaking. I always assume he had a leg up. He had an in. He was connected. He was part of some club that you and I are not a member of and never will be. So he was able to make his war movie, 1986. This time it was starring none other than Charlie Sheen. I think he was something like 18, 19 years old. And you can check this out for yourselves. I was reading different sources. Some say yes, some said no, but supposedly Oliver Stone is being claimed as a Freemason by a Freemasonic organization. I don't know if that's true or not. I do know that he had investors who were part of Israeli intelligence. His funding came from foreign sources. Most of these movies do, because they are not just ideological projects, but they're a way to move money, people, armaments, you name it, resources from country to country, border to border, right? That's one of their main functions that we don't talk about. We should, but we don't. So that's something for further exploration, Platoon. Let's take a look at behind the scenes of Platoon, including a brief glimpse of the infantryman known as Oliver Stone. And most of you know he's one of the top filmmakers in contemporary American or world cinema. JFK, you name it. All the incredible movies. Coming Home was not so good, but I think he directed that. I can't remember. Starring John Voight and Jane Fonda. But here's Platoon.
1965, the 1st United States Army combat troops were committed to the conflict raging in South Vietnam.
There was no point in my living life elsewhere, so this was the place to start. And if it was intended for me to die, I was quite willing to die, because I had thought of suicide quite a bit and written about it, entertained it, and fantasized about it. I want to see what America really is. I want to hang out with people who come from with no education, who come from nowhere, and I want to see what they're thinking. I want to feel what the bottom of the barrel, what reality is like. And I could think of no greater reality than war. I was eager to get to the war, to learn. I wrote the Platoon script in 1976 in New York City in about a few weeks. Primarily because I reached a place in my life where I felt like if I didn't write it at that point in time, I would forget what had happened in the war.
Here was a script that was the most fantastic writing I had come across. It had captured the essence of war from the viewpoint of the foot soldier, and I felt that I had something very special. I went back to all the studios that Oliver had been at, and every one of them rejected the film. That was the first hurdle that we had to get Platoon made.
There's nothing Oliver wouldn't do to get this movie made. And all of a sudden you want to get on that, you want to be part of that show.
I met this guy by the name of Oliver Stone. And the thing that I remember was that he was unlike any guy that I ever met before. As far as he was not like someone that someone would give a bunch of money to make a movie.
When I smoke, I think of Platoon. The film is based on people that I knew in two different infantry outfits over there. I was in the 1st Cavalry, and I was also in the 25th Infantry. So it's the platoon that was drawn in the movie is based on composites and groups of people that I met in different units. The characters in the film, they're accurate. I mean, that's the platoon. The platoon is made up of men, and each one has an individual characteristics. Each one comes from different states, different feelings. I was very comfortable with the cast because I knew that I had, like a baseball coach with a great team, I just knew that I had platoons of different layers of players, and I knew that all these kids were hot.
Nobody had done anything. Tom had done a couple movies. Willem had done a few. Charlie had done squat.
It was pretty magical. I mean, the fact that he chose who he chose.
Heard about the project when I was 18 for the first time. I went on tape. They sent it to Oliver, and he looked at it and got back to us and said that I was too mannered. I don't know, predictable in my gestures, or that I didn't internalize enough of the audition. So I said, okay, this one goes away, and that's that. Oliver got it back on its feet a couple years later, and met me again, not to audition, but just to talk. And then a couple days after that, I got the gig. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, you know? Tom Berenger was really a little bit of a bland, sentimental TV hero prior to, you know, but he was excellent in The Big Chill. And I thought had an edge. I felt like he could push the limit and go evil, go sour.
He told me a story about the real Barnes. They were going down a jungle path somewhere out there on the Cambodian border, just walking along, maintaining, you know, silence. The Barnes character put his hand up to stop, and they came on 3 of the gooks sitting there. I go, well, how did he know? And he said he smelled them. He could smell them.
It's based on people I know. So what you look for is some matching spirit that resembles. You can't go for facial.
Well, of course, I taught the Vietnam War in my survey of Asian American history, since a lot of my students were the children of refugees from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And every yellow person of the time was directly affected by the Vietnam War. And in my Vietnam War film, I would tell it through the perspective of the yellow infantrymen. Right? Yes, there were draftees and some volunteered for the military at the height of the Vietnam War. They grew up like me watching the John Wayne movies of the cowboys and Indians. And they were willing to go over there to kill yellow people. Just like in 2026, they're more than willing to go over to Gaza and kill brown people. I've had experience with these individuals, which I can talk about later. But here's someone who's in my age group who went to Vietnam, that Oliver Stone, the Princeton boy, or Charlie Sheen, the Malibu Magus, or Sean Penn, or Francis Ford Coppola would never consider putting a gook in one of their Kill the Gook movies. Here's a veteran, Vietnam veteran.
Never find Elias Indian, but it was the same kind of...
Japanese American, 3rd generation. We call Sansei. I was born... My name is Mike Nakayama. Japanese American, 3rd generation. We call Sansei. I was born about 3 miles from here in Baldwin Hills, and grew up in this neighborhood in Los Angeles. Right in the middle of this class, the drill instructor just comes running into, or stomping into class, and he goes, "Private Nakayama, stand up." I'm like, oh, I stood up, and he goes, "All right, everybody, this is what a gook looks like. Turn around so everybody can see you." And I'm like thinking, why are you doing this? And all of a sudden I'm starting to feel different, where I really didn't focus on anything like that before. And that was unsettling. And he goes, "Okay, sit down." Later on, my drill instructor comes into our, where we were living. And it's kind of a casual thing, we're allowed to smoke cigarettes. And this is after several weeks. And he goes, "Nakayama, come here. Just give me your wallet." I'm like, "What? You take my money now?" And he goes, "Let me see your pictures." And he goes, "Oh." And I had a picture of my parents, a picture of my sister, and my ex-girlfriend. And he goes, and he looks at this picture of my sister as a high school graduate. He goes, "Hey, she looks like this whore I was fucking when I was in Japan." And I'm, "What?" And, you know, I'm like, "Sir, yes, sir." You know, and they just do all this stuff to intimidate you, basically. But it got really racist and very personal in that sense. And I started thinking a lot more about the differences of me and my fellow Marines and the military. a little bit more, where when I first went in, I was very naive.
Absolute bull.
Yes, there's a whole documentary. I think it might have been a book of so-called Asian American, I call them yellow, veterans of the Vietnam War. Some of them, by the way, had no compunctions about committing atrocities against the other yellow people. Some became judges. Some were rewarded. They were recognized when they came back to the United States as war heroes. Right. Well, let's end on the discussion that Charlie Sheen, and I thought I might have missed it, so I went back and kept looking through the pages. I couldn't find it, but I realized that Charlie Sheen did not talk about the allegations that have been running rampant for years, but they've been intensifying over the last few years, talking about him having committed certain abuses against first Corey Haim. He was a child actor at the time, in case you don't know. Very popular one in his day. We're talking about the 80s and 90s, of course, here. And later, Corey Feldman. You might have seen the two Coreys docu-series. I guess it was on Lifetime. I can't remember what it was. And the controversy. There was a book by Corey Feldman called autobiography called Choreography. I've read that. I think I've given a talk on this a number of years ago where this story is repeated. Well, in this most recent Netflix documentary, of course, Charlie Sheen is asked, well, what about these accusations by Corey Feldman, by the way? And I know people are mocking it and they're dumping on Corey Feldman. I think he's pretty inoffensive, and there's a lot of talentless people out there in the music world, but there is a current documentary by Corey Feldman about his attempt to make it into the music world. I think it's worth your while watching. I can't remember. I think it's on Amazon Prime. I had to pay an extra fee in order to watch it. It was all worth it. It's not that good, but I mean, it's valuable nonetheless. So you can check into your Corey Feldman history. But here is Charlie Sheen, and this is an edit from the Netflix documentary, which, by the way, I should tell you, you can find both part 1 and part 2 free on TubeU. Okay, I'm giving you a hint. You don't have to subscribe to whatever it is. Netflix, because I was thinking, I don't want to subscribe to Netflix, but I have to see this. I have to prepare for this talk on Sunday, and I have to watch both of them. So I just checked TubeU, and it was there. Someone had downloaded it and put it on there for free. I'm just telling you so you could watch it now before it might get pulled down for a copyright violation. I don't know, but I got to see it and study it, and I am able to go back and review it. I won't tell you how. I have my trade secrets, but it's available for you. But here is edit from that documentary 2-parter of Charlie Sheen talking about the charges, the allegations against him by Corey Feldman.
Legal action against Feldman.
You know, there's a lot of good people in this industry, but there's also a lot of really, really sick, corrupt people in this industry.
But I didn't feel like giving that clown that much more, content.
In AKA Charlie Sheen on Netflix, the 60-year-old actor defended himself against a disturbing allegation that decades ago he sexually assaulted child star Corey Haim. Sheen called it a piece of vile fiction invented by Corey Feldman. Unfortunately, Haim cannot speak for himself. He tragically died in 2010 at the age of 38. So what really happened? Here's a timeline of the shocking scandal. In the 1980s, the teen idols known as the Coreys starred in a slew of movies together, including the vampire flick The Lost Boys.
No, it's a pretty cool place. If you're a Martian.
Or a vampire.
Haim also acted alongside Sheen in 1986's coming-of-age comedy Lucas. At the time of filming, Haim was 13 and Sheen was 19. Over the years, the Coreys' career struggled, but the actors remained friends and even starred in the A&E reality show The Two Coreys from 2007 to 2008. Then on March 10, 2010, Corey Haim was found dead in the apartment he shared with his mother, Judy. He died of pneumonia after a long battle with drug addiction. The surviving Corey, Feldman, became an outspoken advocate against child exploitation. In his 2013 memoir, Choreography, he alleged that he and other child actors were groomed and sexually abused through an elaborate Hollywood pedophile ring. Then in 2020, Feldman made an even more shocking allegation. In his documentary, My Truth, The Rape of Two Coreys, Feldman alleged that Haim had told him Sheen raped him during the filming of Lucas. 5 years later, Charlie Sheen is finally responding in his own doc. Not only did he deny the allegation, he also pointed out that Haim's mom previously disputed the claim. In the end, Sheen had choice words for his former friend.
So yeah, no, that one was just off, you know?
Well, that is a cut. I think that's a People magazine report. Just for your information, Lucas came out in 1986. And I think it was maybe the first feature, I guess. I think he was a child actor that featured Corey Haim. And I believe it was the film debut of none other than Winona Ryder and Lucas. And I talked about her to some extent in reviewing this book about the disappearance from Petaluma, California, her own home, Polly Klaas, at age 12. She shows up in that story, the real story I'm talking about. I'm talking about Winona Ryder. So there's all these different crosshatch connections here. Now, one final other interesting biographical connection that I came up with is that Charlie Sheen, and he talks about this extensively in this book, he moves over into television sitcoms. He goes right into the American household, right? It's intimate media. It's not like being in the movies or going to the movies, which further, I think, advances my contention that Charlie Sheen is being groomed for political office, higher political office. So he was brought into a show which became hugely popular. It got all the awards, Golden Globes, Emmy. 2.5 Men, co-starring John Cryer, who's an excellent actor, that ran from 2003 to 2015. And you can read all about the drug-fueled hijinks and the different succession of women, girlfriends, mistresses, call girls, engagements of Charlie. They're too numerous to list here. He's lived the libertine life. He's unapologetic for it, which makes him the perfect candidate for president in a future election. Because we've already been primed by Donald J. Trump, who fits that mold writ large. He was not a movie star. I mean, he was in the wrestling world, and he was in You're Fired, that show. He was in reality television, but he was not in feature films like Charlie Sheen. But Charlie Sheen can follow that blueprint that's already been laid out for him. This is all part of the myth-making process. And believe me, when I say this term, I mean it specifically. I mean that it has political import, and the people who are crafting these shows, designing them, engineering them down to every single syllable, word magic, chaos magic, they are fully aware, they're conscious, they're intent on creating a certain message for you. because Two and a Half Men was co-produced by a individual by the name of Bill Lawrence, who I did not know anything about until doing some inquiry based on the Charlie Sheen career, Two and a Half Men. And it turns out, because I see that his birth name, the names will tell you everything, just like Esteves instead of Sheen. I note that his entry says that he was born William Van Duzer Lawrence IV. Okay, if that doesn't reek of hereditary privilege, I don't know what does. The Van Duzer tells me that there's probably British East India connection going back to colonial times. And the fourth means that they've had 4 generations or more now of bloodline continuity for the co-creator of Two and a Half Men, which features, by the way, one guy who's a jingle writer. By the way, that takes place in the Malibu beach colony. That's why I call Charlie Sheen the Malibu Magus or Magus. It takes place in it's said in there with John Cryer. One is sort of the straight guy responsible. The other guy's a Dionysian, Sybaritic character based on, guess who? Charlie Sheen. He didn't have to do any acting either. that was his life. But Bill Lawrence, or William Van Duzer IV, his great-grandfather, was a industrialist. He was a multimillionaire. He was a pioneer in pharmaceuticals. He was super wealthy. His whole estate later became the original campus of Sarah Lawrence College, named after his wife, who also comes from that patrician lineage. So here we go. Another connection to the elite. The elite bloodlines. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to end it there. My throat is about ready to give up. And I'll be back with you next Sunday, God willing. I don't know if I'll be ready for a discussion of West Wing, but that is in preparation. So tune in, subscribe. God willing, I'll be back with you on next Sunday. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate your support. Let's keep moving ahead together. Thank you. Peace.